Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video I'm very excited to show to all of you out there watching the ALSEYE Infinity i360 AIO. This promises to be something a little bit special. Keep watching to find out more. Okay, so in today's video we're taking a look at the ALSEYE Infinity i360. This is a 360mm AIO. Also available actually in a 240 version, so if this is possibly a little bit big for your system, then you may want to go for the 240 as well. Don't forget, as always, links will be in the video description if you want to check this out in more detail, and I suggest you do, for this is actually at a very competitive price considering the performance that it can offer you. So this at the moment, from what I can tell, is retailing for somewhere around the £115 mark, which puts it slap bang into the crossfire of competition from all of the big brands. So if this thing can actually perform, then yeah, ALSEYE have got a winner on their hands. So in today's video, we can go through, do an unboxing, check out what we've got, and actually the unboxing experience is phenomenal. They've done a really good job on this in terms of presentation. My hopes are that the performance lives up to the hype, which I'm sure it will do. Later on in the video, you'll take a look at some of the installation options, and also we will be doing some testing on our Ryzen 7 7700X system to see how well it does in real world testing. So let's get on with it. This is great. This reminds me of NVIDIA boxes. So obviously ALSEYE is the brand here, Infinity i360 on the box. This is a dual pump system. So what they've done is there's basically two pumps in there. So you've got one for the hot side, one for the cold side of the radiator, which actually is a good thing because if you're just relying on a single pump, potentially if your pump fails, then yeah, you're in a whole world of trouble. But with having two pumps, you've got a little bit of reliability there and potentially a little bit more longevity because two pumps don't have to work as hard as one. Something which is also very cool, which I'm very interested in, is the digital screen. So this has got a digital status screen to tell you what is going on, such as your CPU temperatures, etc, etc. This connects up to the system via a USB 2.0 header, so you don't have to worry about too much wiring there, and also the software is very minimalist, so if you don't want to install it, you don't have to, but I think for most people, you probably will do because it is one of those kind of key features. Also, something which is becoming very popular on the market these days is the cable-free connection. Now, cable-free is a little bit of an exaggeration. Essentially, the fans kind of clip together, as we've seen before on other brands, so it just reduces some of the wiring to make life a little bit easier for installation. On the back of the packaging, it goes into some of the details and specifications, so let's have a quick check through those. The real key ones, I guess, is going to be the fans themselves. So the fans are having a 800 to 1800 RPM fan speed. We're looking at somewhere between 20 and 36.2 dBA, although if you've already seen the video from Gamers Nexus, you'll know that potentially that might not be entirely accurate, but we will take a listen to this later on and see what the actual noise levels are like. You've got a fluid dynamic bearing in there in the actual fans themselves. When it comes to the pump spins at somewhere around about 3200 RPM and is using a ceramic bearing. So again, longevity is something to be concerned about with pumps. Ceramic bearings generally do outlast others. All the other key features are listed on there, so you've probably seen that from some close-ups. Something which actually is really impressive is the flexibility on this. So in terms of Intel, pretty much everything from the 11.5X range right the way up to the modern LGA 1700. If you're looking at the AMD side of things, then it pretty much covers everything. So we've got AM3, AM4, AM5, and also potentially TR4 if you go for the 360 model. If you go for the 240 model, they don't recommend it, but potentially it could still fit for TR4 owners. In terms of the actual size of the radiator, this one's actually on the slightly smaller size in terms of the actual length, which may help for installation. This comes in at 396mm, so is slightly on the smaller side for rads. So with all that out of the way, let's take a look inside, and this is a fantastic unboxing experience. So open up this and it reveals the inner box. So we've got ALSEYE i360 Infinity series, a real-time CPU and GPU status display. That is going to be really helpful because you don't always necessarily want to have another monitor or a separate screen somewhere or just something on your desktop showing you what is going on. If your PC is obviously kind of quite close to you, just glance across, check out the water pump and see what is going on with your system. So looking a little bit further inside, you can see, again, they've done a really good job on here. In terms of presentation, everything is clearly labelled up, tells you what it is, and it just looks really nice. So obviously water block there. You've got your fans, which are all nicely displayed with these nice metal edges on them. You've also got all your fittings, so controller, you've got your accessories, the instruction manual. The instruction manual is actually really good, goes through in great depth, tells you how everything works. All the screws are lettered as well, so if you're not too sure which is which, All the bags have got it on, which we'll see shortly. But yeah, in terms of the actual unboxing and presentation, ALSEYE have got an absolute winner here. So let's start breaking this down. So we'll take a look at the fans first of all. The fans are actually really impressive. They look great. There are two versions of this, so there is a black version and a white version. They've actually sent me the white version. I should mention as well, this has been sent to me free of charge for review purposes. They've not asked me to say anything or do anything, just have a look at the product, see what I think, and make an honest review, which is exactly what we're going to do. So yeah, this is really good. So you've got clip together fans. So all you do is line up the pogo pins with the connector on the other side and just clip them together. Not quite as nice as magnetic ones, but certainly it is definitely a step in the right direction. So they've just snapped together. And of course, the pogo pins transfer things like the RPM and also the RGB status, etc. They physically won't go in round the wrong way. So if you do try and do that, it won't work. So you're not going to risk damaging them too much. And there you go. That is all clipped together. So there are your three fans ready to go. I think they look really nice. They've done some really nice work on here. The blades are actually very, very close to the outer edge, which is going to be great for static pressure. And I think they just look really good. You've also got obviously rubber grommets on both sides. Something which is slightly concerning is the amount of plastic on the back here. So we've got these airflow guides. I think potentially these, having as many as they have here, may actually create turbulence in the fan blades, because every single one of these, the airflow has to go past. You get a kind of chopping noise. So potentially those might be a little bit overkill, but we'll see how it performs, and potentially the benefits of the performance over the noise may outweigh it. So anyway, that is the fans. Let's take a look at what else we get in here. So there is a box which says controller. So this is the actual addressable RGB controller. So if you don't have addressable RGB on your motherboard, which is using the standard 5-pin 3-volt setup, which pretty much most modern boards have, don't worry, ALSEYE got you covered. There is a SATA-powered controller. It is one of those ones where you press the buttons to select your modes, etc. So there's no remote controls or anything. But if for some reason you don't have addressable RGB on your system, then this is going to be very helpful to get a nice lighting style. Also, there is a section here which connects to the actual pump assembly. So a little clip there that goes in. From the pump assembly, you've got three connections. So you've got a 3-pin connection. So that is going to be for powering the pump itself, DC controlled. You've also got the 3-pin 5-volt addressable RGB with a pass-through as well. So if you are limited on connections, then you can daisy chain them should you need to. And also there is this black connection here. So this is the USB 2.0. This is where the actual screen is going to grab the information from your PC from the software, which we'll be installing. So you can check that out later. But most motherboards these days have got at least one of these. If for some reason you don't, you can always buy a splitter to obviously make more connections from your motherboard to plug that in, but I don't think it's going to be too much of a problem. Next one is for the actual fans themselves. So this is the connector for all three fans. So you just attach this on the side onto the metal pogo pins, and then that gives you a 3-pin 5-volt addressable RGB, again with a pass-through, so you can daisy chain them. And also there is a 4-pin PWM, so just a single connection for all three fans, which does minimize wiring significantly. Next up is the accessories box. So this is kind of all the hardware for actually mounting into your computer. Something which I like to see, they have included their ALSEYE T9 Plus thermal compound. This is actually really decent stuff. I think it's 13.5 watts or kelvins, whatever transfer rate. So yeah, it's a pretty decent thermal paste. Well worth having that installed. You also get a backplate. So if you're using this on an Intel system, where obviously you don't have a backplate as such, they do provide that. And also it does fit some AMD models should you lose your AMD bracket. Other than that, all the screws are clearly labeled up. So now we can take a look at what should be the star of the show. So this is the radiator unit itself, so 360mm rad, a little bit of branding on there, ALSEYE at the top, although realistically in most systems you're probably never going to see that. Got these nice pipes. These are actually a little bit more flexible than I thought they were going to be. Going from some other reviews I've seen of this already from Gamers Nexus, they did say that these were a little bit on the stiff side, but actually they do seem to be relatively pliable, so a little bit of flex there, and there's no obvious kink in. What they've done with these is there is an inner layer of PTFE inside the actual rubber tube itself. Also, you've got this nice braiding around the outside, so obviously to prevent damage, etc. The benefits of having the PTFE inner lining on these pipes is the fact that it's less likely to have evaporation. If you just have standard rubber pipes, normally through just its lifetime, eventually you will get some of the fluid from the radiator kind of evaporate through them. It's a natural thing. Whereas with having a PTFE inner liner, it's a little bit more kind of resistant to that kind of thing. So in theory, you should get more longevity out of your system. Although you can potentially refill it, there is a refill port there, which has a void if removed sticker on, so obviously you don't really want to do that unless you absolutely have to, but in theory, again, you shouldn't need to at all. I like also the fact that they've labelled up, or at least marked, the pipes. So this one is the hot one, denoted by red, and the same at this end, and obviously cold there, so intake and outlet, etc. And then that takes us to the pump itself, which has got nice cold plate on the bottom. They've done some really nice design work on this. It looks kind of like something from Empire Strikes Back, the Hoth battle station, or the generators. So it's got a kind of rather industrial look to it. And actually, for my particular system, this is going to work really well because accent colors from our Founders Edition graphics card is going to work really nicely with that. And also we've got obviously white as well. So it should tie in really well with our build, of which we are going to get on and do next, do some testing, and then we'll come back with our results and tell you what it's all about. Okay, so we're back and the installation is complete, as you can possibly see already, and no doubt there is going to be an absolute ton of B-roll because I've filmed an absolute load of it. And I'll be honest with you, mixed opinions. It is a very impressive cooler in terms of installation, very easy to do. The wiring was exceptionally easy and it looks extremely neat. All of the cabling was exactly the right lengths, etc. So it worked very well. And I think it looks absolutely fantastic. Let me know what you think in the comment section. The fans themselves, really nice look to them. The camera really doesn't do them justice. Actually, in real life, they do look pretty spectacular, as does the pump. The pump looks absolutely amazing. I really like it, and I think it ties in quite nicely with the graphics card in there. So you can see you've got a little bit of silver or kind of brushed aluminium on the actual graphics card, and that is coming out, or at least being replicated on that pump head. Now, there is a potential issue. Now, currently at the moment, I've got the fans set to their absolute lowest speed, which is supposed to be 800 RPM. They do state on the box 10% here or there in terms of PWM, and they seem to be running about 880. And if I'm completely silent now, you can probably hear the fans. If you've turned it up loud, you may hear my heartbeat also, but you can definitely hear the fans. There is a definite noise signature to them. And unfortunately, this appears to be the weak spot of this particular design. The fans, if you are someone who is interested in kind of one of the more expected results from AIO cooling, you generally assume that because you're using water cooling, that everything can just be a little bit more sedate, slower fans, etc. You don't need as much forced air through your system. But unfortunately, the PWM range on these being as high as it is, does increase the noise level. So the actual kind of bass level is actually quite loud. And in fact, I've taken some footage a little bit earlier of the noise levels at various different degrees. So let's take a listen to some of those now. This is a sound test with the case closed with the fans on their lowest speed. This is a sound test with the side door open. This is a sound test. I've currently got the mic next to me at the moment, so let's put the mic closer, and this is the fans at full speed. So there you go, you can hear some of the noises that are replicated in my own system, obviously due to things like the case, ergonomics, the installation, all those kinds of things can have a bearing on it, especially when you've got resonance inside of a chassis. But certainly from Steve over at Gamers Nexus, he had a very similar result where he found the fans were to be a little bit louder than he would have liked, and I must admit I'm totally in agreement with Steve on that. Something that I feel Steve didn't necessarily pick up on is the actual pump noise. Now the noise of the actual pump itself, it is a dual pump system, so again you'd think that due to the fact it has a slightly slower RPM than others on the market, so we're looking at around about just over 3,000 RPM for the pumps, whereas there are ones on the market which will spin up to 5,000–6,000 RPM. But this one seems to have a definite hum to it. Let me give you some examples of what that sounds like now. This is a sound test of the pump noise with the microphone right next to the pump. So the pump itself, not entirely silent. It is a little bit intrusive. It is a constant speed as well, even though it is plugged into that header on the motherboard. I've found no way whatsoever of actually tuning the pump, so it's constantly running at 3200 RPM. So having the pump at 100% all the time isn't necessarily a bad thing, but potentially it would be nice to have a little bit of extra control there. Certainly it is kind of expected, although I am seeing this on a lot of AIO coolers on the market at the moment where they are just running at a fixed RPM to prevent people setting them incorrectly too low and having other problems. So it's good in one point, but for those who are a little bit more experienced or expect to have that flexibility, it is a little bit of a shame. So that is essentially the negatives over with, although there is another slight one, but it's not too bad. So let's take a look at some of the positives from this. So the actual look of it, obviously, it looks absolutely great, although that is going to be a subjective thing. The fans look great, the RGB works very well, and yeah, it ties in very nicely. I think they've done a very good job on the aesthetics of it, and actually the build quality itself. Everything's very sturdy, all the fitting kit works exactly as you expect. There's no kind of odd screws or anything where it doesn't fit together. So in terms of the actual presentation and the fittings, etc., can't fault it whatsoever. The only thing I can fault very slightly is actually the LCD display. Now you're going to be seeing some footage of this, you've probably seen already as well, but the LCD display does seem to lose a little bit of its brightness, much like a TFT monitor. If you look at it off of an angle, then it does get darker. Now I've done some filming with it, with the camera panning around so you can see how much it changes. I did notice if I'm sat quite offset from the actual pump head, it does become actually quite difficult to read, although realistically it's quite a small section, so it's more for a little bit of extra bling than it is actually a useful tool. But it does work very well, and it displays the CPU temperatures and the GPU temperatures, and ironically I have got the thermal take unit at the bottom there, which actually displays almost exactly the same things. There's a little bit more flexibility with this, but in terms of actually its usability, that little LCD screen does basically the same as that, and that costs almost the same as that entire water cooling system. So we do have to take it into some context there. You are getting a lot for your money here, although personally I would have preferred the screen to be a little bit brighter and perhaps possibly a little bit bigger, but due to the fact that it's situated in a pump head, there's not a great deal you can do. I did find the animations to be very nice, and I wasn't expecting that. There is a animated cog, which you can see in there, so as it's going through the different things, when it gets to the end of the kind of carousel of information, you do get that nice animation, which was a nice touch, I thought. And I suppose ultimately the thing is, which a lot of you are probably interested in, is actually how does it perform? Now I have to say it does perform spectacularly. Unfortunately, it's a little bit noisy whilst doing it, but the results are excellent. And I did just a random test between my previous cooler, which I had in here, and I did actually look over some data I had from previous tests. And this is definitely heading towards the top of the pile. It's very difficult to actually have a precise number on it because I do make modifications to my system. I do change things like the precision boost overdrive settings, the offsets, all those kinds of things, and even things down to as minimal as fan RPMs. So having a 100% like for like is very difficult to do, but having compared with the PBOs completely removed, so this is the system and the motherboard just running whatever it wants to do, although there is a negative offset of 30. Yeah, the results were great. Between the Pisa cooler, which was in there previously, which is granted an air cooler, but we're getting about an extra 400 to 500 points more in Cinebench, and it's about 5 to 10 degrees cooler depending on which part you're looking at. At the idles, it's around about 5 degrees cooler. At the top end, with the John's Bow cooler, we were getting somewhere around about 96 degrees Celsius, where it kind of got to that throttle point. Whereas with this, we're getting somewhere in the kind of mid 80s. Sometimes it would peak up to 88.3, I think was the highest recorded on there, but even that is still kind of 6 degrees different. And compared with other water coolers that I've had, again, with slightly different setups, normally we're hitting 90 degrees, maybe 92 in some instances, but normally around the 90s. So this has come in under that, which is impressive in itself, although it does come at a noise penalty, unfortunately. So overall, what are my final thoughts? I would say for this, it is going to be one of those things, like most things in the PC market these days, if you like the look of something and it performs adequately, you're more likely to buy it because you like the look of it. And with this, with its distinctive looks and the LCD display, I think that is going to be pushing a lot of people in this general direction. And certainly if you put it into a PC and you're selling on a PC, I think it would attract some additional attention and may elevate your system over those in the rest of the market. But for those of you that do value things like noise and also flexibility to tune your pump settings, then I think potentially you might want to look elsewhere. In terms of raw performance, yes, it's very good and competes very easily with the Freezer 2 from Arctic, which is kind of pretty much one of the better ones on the market. So in terms of performance, it does basically that, but it does do it unfortunately at a slightly higher noise threshold. And potentially, depending on your frame of mind and how much you like doing a little bit tweaking, then potentially you could remove the fans, replace them with your own personal favorite fans, maybe even some Arctic fans, Thermaltake fans, some Noctua fans, whatever you want to do. And then you will obviously gain the benefits of the increased RPM range and potentially lower noise and maybe even better performance. Maybe that's something we can check out in another video. Let me know in the comment section if you'd like to see us do that. But I think that's going to wrap this one up. Essentially, yeah, it's not a bad product. Certainly there are some quirks to it, but overall I think they've done a fantastic job, and if they keep on pushing it in this direction, I think ALSEYE are going to be some serious competition in the market. So there you go. That wraps this one up. I've been Mike, this is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.